morning, friends. You want to see what's in the treasure chest? Why don't you come a little closer? Ooh. It's small, and you can see it right in there. It's carrots and blueberries. Django, this is the only people food that you can get. I know this is for you. What do you think? Should we do some tricks? Okay, come on. Come on, Carrot. Sit. Django, sit. Good boy. All right, check it out. He loves carrots. He loves blueberries. And you know what else? He even loves sweetbread. And one time, he smelled something yummy on the kitchen table, and it was lemon squares, and he gobbled them all up. So raise your hand if you have learned how to make bread during this crazy quarantine. What was your favorite part? Was it kneading the dough? Was it watching it rise? Was it maybe smelling it while it was baking in the oven? I bet for many of us, our favorite part was that first taste of warm bread right out of the oven, maybe with some delicious butter and honey on it, maybe some jelly. Well, and maybe you've heard your mom talk about a bread starter. A bread starter is when you take flour and water and yeast and you mix it together, and then the mixture starts to come alive and make bubbles. And when that happens, that's when it's time to go ahead and make the bread. And in fact, you can take that starter and keep a little bit and make some more bread out of that later. In fact, a little bit of starter can make tons of bread. So think about that for a minute. Come a little closer and see what else is in the treasure chest. Django, I think this is something for me. Very nice. Bread is the basic part of just about any meal, right, Django? In fact, what kinds of bread would you have for breakfast? Maybe, oh, look at that. Maybe toast? Or maybe a muffin? And what about lunch? What kinds of bread would you have for lunch? Maybe a sandwich or yummy tortilla wrap? And then dinner, what kinds of bread do you have for dinner? I like to have cornbread with my tortillas. And so why do we eat bread all the time? You know why we eat bread? Because it fills our tummy so we're not hungry anymore. So let's think back in the Bible. Let's think way back to Exodus 16 in the first part of the Bible with Moses. And I know you know this story. Moses is leading God's people through the desert. And they're complaining and because they're getting really hungry. But the bad part of their complaining is that they're forgetting and they're really not believing that God's going to feed them. They're starting not to trust God. But Moses prays, and you know what God does? God sends bread from heaven. And what is that called? Manna. He sends it down just like rain from the sky. Oh, Django, that's not food. He sends it down just like rain from the sky. And you know what? God did that every day. And so their tummies were filled every day. Now fast forward all the way to Jesus, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years later. Do you remember when he feeds the 5,000 people on the hill? So he feeds all these people with just a little bit of bread. And do you know what he calls himself after? He calls himself the bread of life. Now let's read in my Bible what Jesus says. This is from John 6:32. Jesus said to them, I tell you the truth, it is not Moses who has given you the bread from heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread from heaven. For the bread of God is he who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. And that's Jesus. And did you know Jesus does what the bread does? Because Jesus rose from the dead, he's with us by the power of his Holy Spirit. He's alive. And you know what? Jesus actually calls himself in John 6:51 the living bread, like that starter with all the bubbles that keeps making bread. Jesus never stops feeding our souls. Yeah, that's right, bud. I want to remind you that Jesus does what the bread does. That he fills our souls with the Holy Spirit and makes us alive when we trust in him, when we put our trust in him. So I would encourage you to remember, if you're lonely or frustrated or worried, to pray, because you know what? God is listening, because Jesus is alive. So now, Father Cliff is going to give the sermon in just a few minutes, and I want you to listen to the part about the bread.